Bill was there on the farm. He had 6 sisters. In the morning, he would get up and, oh, he'd be so sick he couldn't do anything. And so the girls would go to school, and when they'd go to school, he'd get out, get his gun, and he would go hunting, or he'd go fishing, or he'd do something. He didn't like to go to school. So it finally came a long time he got drafted in the Army. So when he was drafted in the Army, he was sent to Camp Lejeune over North Carolina. Over North Carolina, he had a friend from Carthage by the name of John Jürgen, and he'd look for John everywhere, couldn't find him. And so one day in the mess hall, there were about 2,000 guys in the mess hall, you know, and heard this big ruckus over on the other side. Old John was over there drunk, walking down a table, and he had hit one plate after other. Food was flying everywhere, and he was yelling, "I'll whip every son of a bitch in here from North Carolina, individually or collectively." So I don't know what they did to John. I think they court-martialed him. But anyway, Daddy liked to play poker, and he got into a ruckus with a sergeant one day. Grabbed him and by the shoulder and pulled him around. And when he did, Daddy cold-cocked him and knocked him down. And when he did, they said, "Well, we're going to court-martial you, or we're going to send you to the front lines." And Daddy said, "Well, just send me to the front lines." So instead of 6 weeks of training, after 2 weeks, they sent him to the front lines in Germany. And in the Argonne Forest, he was the spotter for a 37mm cannon. And you've seen this 37mm shell I've got here at the house. He would take a wire, and he'd go out 100 or so yards in front of the cannon, and then they would shoot, and then he would tap back, and he would say that it was 20 yards to the right, 20 yards to the left, 10 yards high or something, and he would direct the flight of the shell. But finally he found himself in front of the barbed wire. On the other side of the barbed wire, of course, were the trenches and the Germans. And so he decided that there was a machine gun on the other side, and that machine gun would go back and forth. And so he decided he could time that machine gun and walk, if he was careful, across the top of the barbed wire, if he took his time, and get to the other side. So the machine gun went by, so he got up on top of the barbed wire, and he started walking, and staying on top of the bar. And he said all of a sudden that machine gun came back so fast. He couldn't believe he was coming back so fast. And he started hurrying. And when he did, his legs started going down in the barbed wire. And when it did, it started just ripping his legs and his pants and everything all to pieces. And he died with all these scars all over his legs where that barbed wire just tore his legs all to pieces. But he made it to the other side just before that machine gun came back. When he crawled down this ditch where he heard these voices, he had a .45 pistol, and he was walking, and he walked around a corner, and there were 7 Germans, and he held that German pistol on, and he said, "Hands up." And they all stuck their hands up. And he told me about it. He said, "You know, Tommy," says, "in a pistol or any other kind of gun, you've got some slack." And said, "You take that slack out of the pistol just before it goes off." And he said, "I had all the slack out of that pistol, all the slack out before it went off." And he said, "I was scared to death." And said, "Those Germans just dropped their guns." And he said, "I went over and I took a watch off of one." And he said, "Mutter, mutter, mutter." And I figured his mother must have given it to him, so I guess gave it back to him. Then I did take a Luger pistol and a dagger off one, and somebody stole the Luger pistol from him on the way home on the ship. Did get home with the dagger, and I don't know what happened to it, but he told the Germans to get up out of the trench. He said, "Just get up out of this trench and head back that way with your hands over your head." So they got up and headed back, and he always thought in his mind that Sargent York, when he captured the 147 Germans, that they were ready to give up. He said he just never thought York did I mean, he said, you know, he did something special, but he never thought it was that he thought maybe a lot of other soldiers could have done the same thing, that they could have maybe captured those Germans if they'd been there in that situation. Those Germans were ready to give up, he thought. But anyway, he found him some pants. He put on some German soldiers' pants and started to put on a German soldier's coat. And he thought, well, if he did that, he's liable to end up getting shot. So he just went on and stayed with what he had, so he like to froze to death. But anyway, after the war, he got out.